My name's Jake, and I'm 27. Some days, it feels like my family and I are living in entirely different dimensions. I grew up in what most people would consider a pretty standard household. A quiet small town, a modest house, nothing extravagant. My parents weren't wealthy, but we always had enough. My older brother, Ryan, was a quintessential golden boy. He pulled straight A's effortlessly until high school and was the popular football team captain. I, on the other hand, was a quiet one, the kid who was completely obsessed with computers and meticulously saved every single penny from my part-time jobs. We were different, sure, but I honestly never imagined those differences would matter once we grew up. Then I started making real money. I'm not bragging, but I worked my way up to the tech industry, invested wisely, and by 26, I had accumulated enough savings to buy a house outright if I'd wanted to. I chose not to, preferring the liquidity and security of having robust cash flow, but I knew I was standing on solid financial ground. My parents knew it too. That's when the subtle comments began. "Jake's the rich one now," my mom would declare with a light laugh at family dinners. Ryan would just grin and ask, half jokingly, when I was planning to buy him a new car. I'd always laugh it off, assuming it was harmless teasing, but the jokes gradually started to feel sharper, as if there was a hidden bar beneath the surface. Everything began its real slide downhill last spring, the day I went over for Sunday dinner. I had just wrapped up an incredibly stressful project at work and was craving a genuinely relaxing evening. Mom was unusually cheerful when I walked in, almost as if she were concealing an exciting secret. After we all settled down to eat, she dropped it almost too casually. "We finally got Ryan that car he's been dreaming about." Everyone at the table turned to look at me, their faces alight, as if I should be equally thrilled. I offered my congratulations, a bit bewildered. It was a brand new luxury SUV, definitely not cheap. Then Mom, still beaming, added, "We use your account to cover most of it. You can afford it." At first, I honestly thought she was joking. My fork was midway to my mouth, laden with food, when the gravity of her words finally registered. She was serious. My stomach plummeted. "What do you mean, my account?" I asked, trying desperately to keep my voice steady, calm. She waved her hand dismissively, as if I were being overly dramatic. "Oh, you left me as a co-signer years ago when we set up that savings account. You never use it. Ryan needed a car, so we just took $120,000 from there. You'll be fine." Ryan, sitting across from me, smirked. "Yeah, thanks, man. It's about time some of that money got used for something fun." I couldn't eat another bite after that. My mind was reeling, a chaotic storm of disbelief and anger. They hadn't even bothered to ask me. They had simply taken it. My entire childhood flashed before my eyes. Ryan always getting the bigger slice of cake, the shiny new bike, the better room, and me being told to just stop making a fuss. I managed to ask why they hadn't at least called me first. My mom's smile finally faded, replaced by a hardened expression. "Jake, you have more money than all of us combined. If you can't support your own family, what's the point? Besides, Ryan works hard. He deserves it." I left dinner early that night, the conversation replaying endlessly in my head. On the drive home, I couldn't shake the chilling feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us permanently. My own family had just outright stolen from me, and they expected me to be grateful. That night, I logged into the account and stared at the numbers, at the gaping hole where my money used to be. My chest ached. It wasn't even about the car anymore. It was about the audacity, the profound sense of entitlement they had to decide what I owed them. I didn't confront them immediately. I needed to cool down, to think clearly. But 2 weeks later, Mom called and casually mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Ryan's looking at houses now, and we might need to dip in again for the down payment. Don't worry, you'll get back eventually." That was the precise moment I realized this wasn't just a one-time betrayal. This was the ominous beginning of something much larger and far, far worse. Sleep became a stranger after that phone call. I would just lie there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the monotonous hum of my apartment fridge, feeling as if the walls themselves were slowly closing in. This had transcended mere money. It was about control. My family had, without consultation, appointed my carefully accumulated savings as their new safety net, their personal community fund, and they hadn't even possessed the basic decency to ask. Mom's voice echoed in my head, so casual, so utterly certain I would simply agree to hand over more money, as if the decision had already been made for me. I ignored her call the next morning, and the one after that. I desperately needed time to think, to process, to figure out what words, if any, could even begin to address this. My lunch breaks were spent pacing circles around my office courtyard, replaying that disastrous dinner scene over and over. The look on Ryan's face kept flashing in my mind, that infuriatingly smug little grin, as if he'd just been crowned king of the family. And maybe in their eyes, he had. By the end of the week, Mom actually showed up at my apartment. She never did that. She despised the city, hated the traffic, abhorred the noise. But there she was, standing outside my building, a Tupperware container of her infamous lasagna clutched in her hand, looking as though we were about to embark on some sweet, wholesome mother-son bonding moment. I almost didn't let her in. "Jake." She began the moment I opened the door, not even bothering to step inside. "I don't know why you're ignoring me. Ryan found the perfect house. It's on the market now. We need to move fast, or someone else will get it." I just stared at her, utterly speechless for a long moment. "Mom," I finally managed, my voice strained. "Do you even hear yourself? You took my money without asking, and now you're back asking for more. Do you have any idea how much I've worked to save that?" She rolled her eyes, a familiar gesture that conveyed I was being utterly ridiculous. "Of course I do. But what's the point of saving all that money if you're just going to sit on it? This is your brother's future, your family's future. Someday this house will be where we all gather for holidays. You'll thank me later." I almost laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that caught in my throat. Thank her? For systematically draining my life savings for a house I didn't even want to live in. For a future that wasn't mine? My hands were shaking, not just from anger, but from something far deeper, something that felt like a profound, gut-wrenching betrayal. "Mom, no," I said, my voice emerging sharper than I intended, laced with a tremor of steel. "You don't get to decide how I spend my money." Her face changed instantly. The saccharine sweetness vanished, replaced by a stern, unyielding expression I hadn't seen since I was a teenager being grounded. "Jake, you need to stop being so selfish. Ryan has always been there for you. He's your brother. If the roles were reversed, he would help you." That last part landed like a physical punch. If the roles were truly reversed, Ryan wouldn't give me a dime. He wouldn't even lend me gas money without meticulously documenting it on Instagram. But I bit my tongue, keeping my mouth shut. There was no getting through to her that day. The next weekend, there was another family dinner. I almost skipped it entirely, but a perverse part of me wanted to witness just how far the charade would go. When I arrived, everyone was already gathered in the living room, Ryan holding court, animatedly discussing a house he desperately wanted. He had pictures pulled up on his phone, proudly showcasing the huge backyard, the sprawling open kitchen, the sparkling pool. "Jake, man, you got to see this place," he called out enthusiastically when I walked in. "It's perfect, and thanks to you, it's basically ours." I froze in the doorway, a chill running down my spine. "What do you mean? Thanks to me?" Mom, ever the orchestrator, jumped in smoothly. "I talked to the bank this week. We went ahead and got pre-approval for the loan. Your savings will cover the down payment. It's all set." I couldn't believe it. They hadn't just asked me. They had actively initiated the process, making executive decisions as if I had already agreed. Slowly, deliberately, I set my keys down, desperately trying to maintain a facade of calm. "You had no right to do that," I stated, my voice low but firm. Ryan actually laughed, a dismissive, arrogant sound, as if I had just uttered a hilarious joke. "Dude, relax. You make more in a year than most people do in 5. This is nothing to you." I turned to Mom, and for the first time, I made no attempt to conceal the raw anger simmering in my voice. "Close the application right now. I am not paying for this." The room plunged into a suffocating silence. My dad, who until this point had been conspicuously quiet, finally spoke up, his voice heavy with disapproval. "Jake, don't make this harder than it has to be. Your brother deserves this. He's starting a family. You're just... What? Sitting on your money, living alone in that apartment?" It was as though they had meticulously rehearsed this speech. Every word calibrated to guilt-trip me, to make me feel like the villain for not playing along. "I'm not sitting on my money," I retorted, my teeth clenched. "I'm building a future for myself, one that doesn't involve being your personal ATM." Ryan threw his hands up in exasperation. "See, this is what I mean. You've changed, man. Ever since you got that big job, you act like you're better than us." That stung more deeply than I cared to admit. I had never flaunted my success, never lorded it over anyone. I had simply worked hard and made smart choices. Was I truly supposed to apologize for that? Dinner was an excruciatingly tense affair after that. Nobody talked much, and I, once again, left early. On the drive home, a heavy knot formed in my chest, a cold, unyielding weight that refused to dissipate. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had a family. I felt like I had enemies, adversaries who merely happened to share my last name. Over the next few weeks, the relentless pressure continued. Mom kept calling, sending me real estate listings, texting me excitedly about our future home. Ryan would send group messages with pictures of furniture, gushing about how he couldn't wait to host barbecues there. My dad even sent me a subtly pointed article about the importance of helping family. It was relentless, an unending barrage designed to wear me down. Then, late one night, I received a call from my bank. A fraud alert. Someone had attempted to move another substantial sum from my savings account. My stomach dropped like a stone. I knew exactly who it was. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, feeling the slow, insidious burn of something far colder than anger. It was a chilling realization that they weren't going to stop. Not until I made them stop. And in that very moment, a definitive decision solidified within me. I would take back control, even if it meant tearing down every last shred of what they believed they were entitled to. I woke up the morning after the fraud alert call with a persistent pit in my stomach and a decision weighing on me like a literal brick. I couldn't ignore this any longer. The quiet, passive way I had been handling things was unequivocally not working. They were escalating, pushing boundaries with brazen disregard. I had tried keeping my distance, tried to be reasonable, tried to establish clear boundaries. They simply hadn't listened. I spent that entire day meticulously going through every single account I owned. I changed every password, moved significant funds into new high-security accounts, and even set up two-factor authentication on financial avenues I hadn't touched in years. I then called the bank personally and, with a tremor in my voice, instructed them to remove every name but mine from every account, to irrevocably revoke any co-signer privileges my parents might still possess. The representative hesitated, her voice tinged with concern as she noted the family connections, but eventually complied after I faxed in the required documentation. By the time I was done, I felt a profound sense of amputation, as if I just severed a limb. Those accounts had been inextricably linked to my family since I was a teenager, but it had to be done. Later that evening, I received a call from my mom. I didn't answer. Then a text popped up. "Jake, what did you do? We can't access the account." A minute later, another from Ryan. "Not cool, man. You locked us out. We were about to put in the offer on the house. You just cost us everything." I stared at the screen, my hands growing cold. They weren't even asking for an explanation. They were accusing me, as if I were the one who had stolen from them. I ignored them for a few days, clinging to faint hope that maybe things would cool down, that they would understand the gravity of their actions. But on Friday night, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. My heart instantly dropped into my stomach. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that I had locked it that morning. I stepped inside, cautiously, every nerve in my body screaming a silent warning. And then I saw it. My living room was a disheveled mess. Drawers were pulled open, papers were scattered everywhere. And sitting right there on my coffee table was my laptop, clearly, unmistakably touched. My email was open. My bank accounts page was pulled up on the screen. I stood there, frozen in disbelief, for a full minute before the horrifying realization slammed into me. Someone had been here in my sanctuary, and they had been actively trying to get into my accounts. The anger that rolled through me was white-hot, pure, unadulterated rage. My first thought was to call the police, but a flicker of doubt, a gut feeling, made me hesitate. I checked my hidden security camera, a small, discreet one I'd installed after a break-in scare the previous year. I scrubbed through the footage until I saw it. Ryan. There he was, strolling into my apartment as if he owned the place, casually using the spare key I had foolishly given Mom years ago, supposedly only for emergencies. He went through my mail, my desk drawers, my personal files. At one point, he sat on my couch with my laptop on his knees, typing away. I had to pause the video because my hands were shaking too violently to hold the phone steady. When I finally pressed play again, I watched him meticulously put the laptop back and then leave, calmly locking the door behind him, as if nothing untoward had happened. I felt sick, utterly violated. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about trust, about personal safety, about the sanctity of my home. My own brother had broken into my private space to try and steal from me. The very next morning, a potent cocktail of fury and resolve propelling me, I drove straight to my parents' house. I didn't text, didn't call. I simply showed up. When I pulled into the driveway, Ryan's car was there, shiny and smug in the bright sunlight, a stark reminder of their ongoing entitlement. Mom opened the door before I even had a chance to knock, as if she had been anticipating my arrival. "Jake," she said, her tone a brittle, icy veneer. "I hope you're here to apologize. Do you realize the position you've put us in? The sellers accepted another offer because we couldn't send a down payment in time. You ruined this for your brother." I stepped inside, my jaw tight, my resolve hardening with every word she uttered. "Where's Ryan?" I asked, cutting through her accusations. He was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, looking as if he didn't have a single care in the world. "Look who finally decided to show up," he said, a casual, arrogant smirk playing on his lips. "Took you long enough." Without a word, I pulled out my phone and played the security footage. The smirk instantly fell from his face as soon as he recognized himself on screen. "Jake," Mom said sharply, her voice laced with confusion and alarm. "What is this?" "It's video proof of your son breaking into my apartment," I stated, my voice steady but quiet, laced with an undeniable undercurrent of ice. "He tried to access my accounts. He went through my things." Ryan's face turned a furious shade of red. "I wasn't breaking in. I was just—" "You were just what?" I snapped, my voice finally rising, the carefully constructed calm shattering. "Just helping yourself? Just looking for more money to take without asking? You crossed a line, Ryan." My dad, hearing the commotion, came in from the garage, his face already tense, prepared for an argument. "Jake, calm down. You're making this into a bigger deal than it is." Ryan had every right. He had no right. I cut him off, my voice booming with a force I hadn't known I possessed. "You all had no right. This is my life, my home, my money, and you've treated it like it's some kind of shared family fund you can raid whenever you want." For a long, suffocating moment, nobody said anything. The air in the room felt thick, heavy, like a violent storm was about to break. Then Mom spoke, her voice chillingly cold. "If you're going to be like this, maybe you shouldn't come around anymore. We don't need your attitude in this house. You can either help this family or you can stay gone." I just stared at her, those words hitting me harder than I expected. Help this family or stay gone. As if I was a problem, as if I was the one tearing us apart. I turned and walked out without another word. As I got into my car and slammed the door, my hands were still shaking. But now it wasn't fear. It was something sharper, something that felt almost like absolute clarity. Because at that moment, I knew one thing with undeniable certainty. If they wanted me gone, if they wanted me to play the villain, I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. But first, I was going to make damn sure they understood just how monumentally big a mistake they had made. I didn't go home right away. I just drove. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, but I didn't even notice the pain. I drove past my apartment, past the city limits, down empty, unfamiliar back roads with the windows down, letting the cold, crisp air bite at my face. I desperately needed space. Space from them, from my suffocating thoughts, from everything that felt like it was pressing in on me. When I finally pulled over, it was at some forgotten overlook by the river. The place was deserted, hauntingly quiet, save for the ceaseless rush of the water below. I sat there with the engine off, staring out at the dark, churning water, and let the white-hot anger slowly drain out of me until all that was left was something heavier, a dull, aching sadness. It hit me then with the force of physical blow. I wasn't just mad at them. I was mourning them. I was mourning the family I thought I had, mourning the parents who were supposed to protect me, the brother I used to play catch with in the backyard. Those people weren't real anymore. Maybe they never truly were. I stayed there until it was almost midnight, lost in my thoughts, then finally drove back to my apartment. I locked the door behind me, double-checked the deadbolt twice, and leaned against it for a long time, just breathing, trying to regain some semblance of equilibrium. My apartment had never felt so small, so exposed, so vulnerable. That weekend, I began the meticulous process of pulling away completely. I stopped answering texts, stopped picking up calls. I blocked the relentlessly irritating family group chat that Mom kept spamming with updates about Ryan's life. At first, it felt profoundly freeing, an exhilarating release, but gradually, the silence started to eat at me. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach knotted, wondering if it was them, wondering if they would somehow show up at my door again. The first real blow came a few days later, when I received a chilling letter from my parents' lawyer. It was meticulously written in polite, dry legal language, but the underlying message was brutally clear. They were threatening to sue me. Sue me? Their own son? To recover funds wrongfully withheld that they brazenly claimed had been agreed upon for Ryan's house. I actually laughed when I first read it, a dark, disbelieving laugh, not because it was remotely funny, but because it was so utterly surreal, so unfathomable. They were truly willing to take this that far. But later that night, sitting on my couch with the crumpled letter on the coffee table, the laughter transmuted into something else, something heavier. My chest felt like I'd swallowed a stone. This was it, I realized, the point of no return. There was absolutely no going back after this. I stopped going out with friends, stopped answering work calls after hours, stopped doing anything that wasn't absolutely necessary for survival. I felt like I was holding my breath all the time, constantly on edge. Every innocuous sound in the hallway made me jump, my heart pounding. Then came the inevitable social fallout. Mutual relatives started calling, leaving voicemails that ranged from a cajoling, "Jake, just talk to them. You're being dramatic," to an accusatory, "You owe it to your family to make this right." My aunt left a particularly scathing message that stung more than I care to admit. "Your mother is heartbroken," she tearfully asserted. "She said you stormed out and won't even apologize. She raised you better than this." Apologize for what? For fiercely protecting my own hard-earned money from being stolen? For not letting my brother use me as his personal, convenient bank? The worst, most insidious part was that there were moments, late at night lying in bed, when I almost believed them. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I was overreacting. That was a torturous mental loop I got stuck in. Anger, doubt, guilt, then back to anger. But then I'd force myself to look at the security footage again. Ryan, casually sitting on my couch with my laptop, rifling through my life as if it were nothing. That indelible image would snap me back to harsh reality every single time. Eventually, something deep inside me shifted. The pervasive sadness stopped feeling like an oppressive weight and began to solidify, transforming into a protective wall, a strong, unbreachable wall between me and them. And behind that wall, for the first time in weeks, I started thinking with chilling clarity. I began taking quiet, deliberate steps to cut them out of my life completely. I changed the locks on my apartment door and had the spare key recut, ensuring they had no access whatsoever. I moved all of my remaining funds into an entirely different bank, one they had never had access to, and set up a new investment account under a completely different institution. Crucially, I also started documenting everything. I saved every single text message, every email, every anguished voicemail. I made multiple copies of security footage and stored them on a separate, encrypted drive. I forwarded the threatening letter from their lawyer to my own attorney and had him draft a formal, unequivocal response, making it abundantly clear that if they tried anything further, I was fully prepared to press criminal charges for trespassing and attempted theft. It wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about meticulously building a comprehensive record, a paper trail that could protect me later if things inevitably got uglier. And they did get uglier. One afternoon, I came home to find a chilling note slipped under my door, written in Ryan's unmistakable handwriting. It read, "You think you're better than us now, but wait until Mom and Dad kick you out of their will. You'll regret this." That was the precise moment I realized they weren't just after my savings. They were actively trying to punish me, to break me down emotionally and financially, until I finally gave in to their demands. But instead of breaking me, it hardened something fundamental inside me. I stopped feeling guilty, stopped questioning myself, stopped doubting my own judgment. They wanted a villain? Fine, I could be the villain. The next morning, resolute, I sat down with my lawyer in his office and, with a calm, unwavering voice, told him I wanted to take this further. I wanted a restraining order against Ryan. I wanted everything meticulously documented in writing. And if my parents continued their relentless harassment, I wanted to explore every possible legal option against them, too. Walking out of that office, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not happy, not yet, but undeniably in control. For the first time since this entire ordeal began, I wasn't just reacting to what they did. I was proactively starting to make moves of my own. And deep down, I knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning. When I walked out of my lawyer's office that day, the air felt profoundly different. It was crisp clear, as if I'd finally stepped out from under a suffocating storm cloud that had been following me for months. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I wasn't just waiting for the next punch to land. I was standing up, gloves metaphorically on, ready to swing back if I had to. The first tangible change I made was subtle, but incredibly impactful. I stopped reacting to every single message and voicemail. Instead of feeling that familiar jolt of panic every time my phone buzzed, I muted all of their numbers, my parents' numbers, Ryan's number, even the incessant group chat with my relatives. It was like hitting a mute button on the pervasive chaos that had infiltrated my life. My apartment, for the first time in weeks, finally felt like mine again. Quiet, safe, a true sanctuary. Work became my anchor, my escape, my new obsession. I threw myself into my project with a singular focus, staying late, not because I was forced to, but because I genuinely wanted to. And the crazy thing was, it paid off handsomely. My manager, noticing the extraordinary effort, started entrusting me with bigger responsibilities, tasks normally reserved for more senior staff members. I crushed every deadline, solved complex problems nobody else could untangle. 2 months later, I was sitting in a polished boardroom with the VP of my department, being offered promotion, and not just a small step up, but a significant, life-altering one. My salary jumped by nearly 40%, and it came with a substantial bonus. I walked out of that meeting grinning like an idiot, a genuine, unburdened smile. And for a fleeting moment, my hand instinctively reached for my phone to call my parents, to share the good news, just like I used to. But then I remembered the last conversation we'd had, the chilling way Mom had told me I could stay gone if I wouldn't hand over my money. And the smile faded, replaced by a cold resolve. Instead of calling them, I called my lawyer. We meticulously updated my will, my beneficiary designations, and every single bit of paperwork that had my family's names on it. If something ever happened to me, not a single cent of my estate would go to the people who had actively tried to destroy me. With the promotion money, I did something I've been dreaming about for years. I bought a place of my own, a real home, not just a temporary rental apartment. It was a sleek, modern condo with floor-to-ceiling windows and a breathtaking view of the city skyline. The very first night I slept there, lying on a mattress in the middle of the spacious living room because the furniture hadn't even been delivered yet, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. peace. This place wasn't just a home. It was concrete proof. Proof that I could build a life entirely on my own terms, separate and distinct from their parasitic expectations. And as my life steadily improved, theirs, it seemed, began to unravel with an almost poetic justice. I didn't actively go looking for updates, but they had a way of finding me. Mutual friends, cautiously navigating the fractured family landscape, would mention things in passing. That Ryan had lost his job after repeatedly blowing off too many shifts, that the dream house they coveted had been bought by someone else, that my parents were now dipping deeply into their retirement savings to cover Ryan's mounting bills. Every time I heard one of these updates, I felt a peculiar twinge of something. Not exactly satisfaction, but something close to it, a grim, quiet sort of validation. I doubled down on focusing on myself. I started hitting the gym 3 times a week, not as a form of self-punishment, but to clear my head, to channel the lingering tension into something productive. I signed up for a cooking class on weekends and learned how to make far more than just takeout noodles. I reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen since college, people who remembered me as I was before all this suffocating mess. And slowly, tentatively, I started smiling again, a genuine, unforced smile. Then came the opportunity that truly changed everything. A colleague I'd worked with on a major project reached out to me about a startup he was joining. They were specifically looking for someone with my exact skill set, and they weren't just offering a competitive salary, but significant equity in the nascent company. It was substantial risk, undeniably, but for the first time in months, I wasn't scared to take one. I said yes. The next 6 months were a relentless blur of 12-hour days, late-night brainstorming sessions, and exhilarating problem-solving marathons. It was utterly exhausting, but felt incredibly good, like building something substantial from the ground up, something that was unequivocally mine. And when the company miraculously landed a massive funding round, my equity transformed into something truly substantial. Substantial enough that I didn't just have savings anymore. I had real, undeniable wealth. By the end of that year, I was in a completely different, unassailable position than when this all started. I had a beautiful home, a thriving career, and enough money wisely invested that I didn't have to worry about anyone ever holding financial power over me again. And that was precisely when the phone calls started up again. At first, I ignored them, letting them ring into oblivion, but the messages gradually became more desperate, more tinged with a raw vulnerability. Mom left a voicemail that sounded like she had been genuinely crying. "Jake, honey," her voice cracked to the receiver, "I know things have been rough between us, but your father and I really need to talk. It's about Ryan. Please call me." Then a text from Dad followed. "Jake, your brother's in trouble. He needs help. Please don't turn your back on us now." I didn't answer. Not yet, because for the first time, the entire power dynamic had dramatically shifted. They weren't calling to demand anything. They were calling because they desperately needed me. And a part of me knew, with a quiet certainty, that this was a precise moment I had been waiting for. When I heard my dad's message, I didn't delete it like I had the others. I just sat there in my pristine condo, phone in hand, replaying it again and again. Your brother's in trouble. He needs help. It wasn't anger in his voice this time. It was raw, unadulterated desperation. I didn't call back. Not yet. Instead, I started digging. I still had quiet connections in town, and people talked, especially when someone like Ryan began to make a public spectacle of himself. It didn't take long to learn the full extent of what had happened. Ryan had, with characteristic arrogance, quit his job months ago, boldly telling everyone he was about to launch his own business. He took out multiple loans, maxed out several credit cards, bought flashy, expensive equipment, and even rented a prime retail space for some kind of luxury car detailing studio. The business, predictably, never even got off the ground. He fell disastrously behind on rent, got sued for a mountain of unpaid bills, and now creditors were relentlessly hounding him. The ultimate kicker? The very car they had bought with my money, that gleaming luxury SUV Ryan had been so insufferably proud of, had been repossessed. I should have felt a triumphant vindication, and a small, reptilian part of me did. But more than that, I felt a strange, detached calm. This, I realized, was what rock bottom looked like for them. And for the first time, I was in a unique position not just to passively observe, but to actively decide how this painful story would finally end. I called my lawyer again. We met in his office the next day, and I laid everything out, a clinical recounting of their transgressions. The break-in, the threats, the attempted unauthorized transfer from my account, and now the desperate, pleading calls for help. He leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers, and regarded me with a knowing expression. "You're in a very strong position right now, Jake," he stated matter-of-factly. "Legally, you have every right to cut them off completely. But if you're looking for a way to send a definitive, undeniable message, there are several options." That was when we began crafting a plan. Not something rash or impulsively emotional, but something careful, deliberate, and airtight. Something that would not only protect me, but ensure they could never again try to spin the narrative and paint me as a callous villain. I had him draft a formal cease and desist letter, addressed meticulously to my parents and Ryan, outlining every single violation they had committed, from unauthorized withdrawals to the egregious act of trespassing, and putting them on unambiguous notice that any further harassment would result in swift, severe legal action. We included copies of security footage stills, meticulously time-stamped and signed, just to provide an undeniable visual reminder that I possessed irrefutable evidence. But I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I began systematically gathering more leverage. I reached out to a trusted friend who worked in finance, and over coffee, I posed a carefully worded hypothetical question. If someone misused a joint account to take money without permission, what could the other party do? She raised an eyebrow, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. Hypothetically, she mused, they could file a claim, freeze the funds, and demand a full accounting. If they had clear proof, it could even become a criminal matter. That gave me a truly potent idea. I filed a formal report with the bank regarding the original $120,000 withdrawal for Ryan's infamous car. The bank, seeing the nature of the claim, immediately opened an internal review, and because I had never signed anything authorizing the transaction, they were legally obligated to investigate thoroughly. I didn't know if I'd ever get the money back, but the sheer look on Ryan's face when he found out the bank was scrutinizing his shiny new toy purchase would be worth it by itself, even if the car was already long gone. Meanwhile, my life outside of their toxic orbit continued its impressive upward trajectory. The startup I had joined was gaining serious, undeniable traction, and I was an integral part of key negotiations for a massive partnership deal that had the potential to double our revenue overnight. My stake in the company was becoming more valuable by the week, a testament to my own hard work and smart decisions. I was well on track to be financially independent for life by the time I turned 30, and that burgeoning power, the kind of power they could never take away from me, finally gave me the quiet confidence to answer one of my mom's increasingly desperate calls. It was a Thursday evening when I picked up. "Jake!" Her voice sounded small, almost timid, utterly unlike her usual commanding tone. "Oh, thank God you answered. We've been so worried." I didn't say anything for a moment, letting the silence stretch just enough to make her palpably uncomfortable. "What do you want?" I said finally, my voice calm, devoid of emotion. She hesitated, a long, drawn-out pause. "It's Ryan. He's in trouble. He owes a lot of money, and they're threatening to take us to court. We could lose the house, Jake." I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting the full weight of that statement sink in. Lose the house. The same house where she'd so callously told me I could stay gone. "I see," I said, my voice perfectly even. "And why are you telling me this?" "Because you can help," she said, her voice almost pleading now, devoid of its usual arrogance. "You have the means. If you could just—" I cut her off gently, but firmly. "Mom, do you remember telling me that I could either help the family or stay gone?" She was silent, a heavy, defeated silence. "Well, I concluded," my voice clear and unwavering, "I stayed gone." And then I hung up. The very next morning, I instructed my lawyer to send a cease and desist letter. But I wasn't done yet. A few days later, I learned from a friend who still lived near my parents that their house had quietly been listed for sale. They were desperately trying to get out from under the crushing mountain of debt before it completely swallowed them whole. The timing couldn't have been more perfectly orchestrated because I had been waiting for exactly this moment. When I heard their house was on the market, something inside me clicked into place with an almost audible sound. It was like the final, intricate piece of a complex puzzle I had been meticulously putting together for months had finally locked in. They were profoundly vulnerable now, financially, emotionally, socially, and this wasn't about petty payback anymore. This was about definitive closure, about making absolutely sure they could never, ever rewrite the narrative to cast me as the heartless villain. I met with my lawyer again the next day. This time, there was no hesitation, no tremor of doubt in my voice. I want to make a move, I told him, my words sharp and precise. Something that makes it crystal clear that they can't just take from me and simply get away with it. He listened carefully, his expression thoughtful, then nodded slowly. If the house is up for sale, he explained, there's a lot we can do to significantly slow things down. We can file a lien, for instance, make a formal claim on the proceeds for the money taken from your account. That would effectively put everything on hold until it's fully resolved. I leaned back in my chair, a chilling thought forming in my mind. Considering that, I asked, would they know it was me? Oh, they'd absolutely know, he said with a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Their realtor would be legally obligated to tell them the sale can't close until the lien is lifted. I sat there for a long, contemplative moment, staring at the ceiling, picturing it all. Mom pacing frantically in the kitchen, Ryan shouting indignantly about how unfair it all was, Dad trying desperately to keep his voice calm, but seething with suppressed fury underneath. The exact same look they'd all given me when they smugly told me they'd taken my money and expected me to thank them. Do it, I said, my voice quiet but firm, irrevocably sealing their fate. Within a week, the lien was officially filed. My lawyer handled all the intricate paperwork, but I insisted on getting a copy of the filing, which I kept on my desk like a hard-won trophy. It wasn't just about getting the money back anymore, though that was certainly part of it. It was about making them feel the crushing weight of what they had done, the tangible, undeniable consequences of their actions. And then, just to twist the knife a little deeper, I made my next deliberately calculated move. I reached out to their realtor, through my lawyer, of course, and asked for a showing. I wanted to see the house before it sold. At first, the realtor hesitated, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes, but when he learned I was a serious, pre-approved buyer, he reluctantly agreed. Walking back into that house was profoundly strange. It smelled exactly the same. The faint, familiar scent of Mom's lavender cleaner, the familiar creak of the floorboards near the hallway. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a meticulously preserved stage set, like I was walking through someone else's distant, faded life. The realtor gave me the standard tour, pointing out every upgrade and feature, but I barely listened. My mind was buzzing with a singular, detached thought. I imagined what it would look like if I owned it, not as a cherished family home, but as a cold, calculated investment property. Renters moving in and out, no sentimental ties whatsoever. I didn't make an offer that day, but the idea firmly lodged itself in my brain and steadfastly refused to leave. Meanwhile, the cease and desist letter I'd sent had begun to have its intended, chilling effect. My parents stopped calling. Ryan went completely silent. Mutual relatives who had been so quick to guilt-trip me before suddenly stopped leaving self-righteous voicemails. It was as if they had finally, truly realized I wasn't bluffing, that there were real, concrete consequences to relentlessly pushing me. Then, 2 weeks later, I received a short, sharp text from Ryan. You think you've won, huh? Mom and Dad are losing everything because of you. Hope you're happy. I stared at the message for a long, deliberate time before typing back a single, unyielding line. I didn't make you take my money. You did that all by yourself. I never got a reply. A month later, the house still hadn't sold. The lien had effectively scared off more than one potential buyer, and word was beginning to spread around the neighborhood that something was severely wrong with the property's title. My parents, who had always been so meticulously concerned with maintaining perfect appearances, were now the humiliating subject of local gossip. And then came the final, unexpected opportunity, the one I hadn't even consciously been expecting. The realtor reached out again, this time almost begging me to reconsider. "The sellers are desperate," he confided, his voice strained. "If you're still interested, they'll take almost any reasonable offer." I scheduled another showing, this time with my lawyer present. And when I walked through those familiar doors again, I didn't feel anger this time. I felt something colder, something calmer, a deep sense of strategic satisfaction. By the end of that week, I had submitted an offer below market value, certainly, but still high enough to be incredibly tempting given their dire situation. It was accepted within 48 hours. I didn't tell them it was me until closing day. When my parents walked into that sterile closing office and saw me sitting across the table, their faces instantly drained of all color, turning a ghostly white. Ryan, predictably, didn't come. Perhaps he simply couldn't face me. Mom's hand shook uncontrollably as she signed the papers, her signature a tremulous scrawl. Dad wouldn't even look at me at all, his gaze fixed stubbornly on the table. I didn't say a single word. Not then. Not until every last signature was on the page and the gleaming new keys were sitting provocatively in front of me. Only then did I slowly look up and meet their eyes, holding their gaze. "You told me I could stay gone," I said quietly, my voice devoid of emotion, a mere whisper in the hushed room. "So I did. But now this house, this memory, is mine, just like my money always was." I picked up the keys, the metallic weight feeling strangely satisfying in my palm, thanked the realtor with a polite nod, and walked out without looking back. For the first time in my entire life, I felt completely, utterly, and irrevocably free. When I stepped out of that closing office, the keys heavy and cool in my hand, I felt like I just crossed a finish line, not just in a race, but in a long, arduous journey. Yet I knew, with a sinking certainty, that the true emotional fallout was still to come. That evening, I drove to the house one last time before the new locks were installed. The place was empty now, stripped bare of all furniture, the echoes of my footsteps bouncing off the stark, unadorned walls. I walked through every room slowly, deliberately. The kitchen where I'd done my homework as a kid, the long hallway where Ryan and I used to race Matchbox cars, the backyard where we grilled burgers every summer. It all felt so much smaller now, strangely diminished, as if it had shrunk to match the smallness of the people who had once tried to control me. The next morning, the calls started again, a persistent, insistent buzzing against the quiet peace I had finally found. I didn't answer at first, letting them go to voicemail, but eventually I picked up. "Jake!" Mom's voice cracked through the receiver, a raw, painful mixture of anger and heartbreak. "How could you do this to us? We built our lives in that house. That was supposed to be your brother's future." I closed my eyes, letting her words settle for a moment, absorbing their sting before replying. "Mom," I said, my voice steady, even, "you built your lives by taking from mine. You stole my money without asking. You broke into my home. You threatened me. You told me to stay gone. I just gave you what you asked for." "You're being cruel," she snapped, but there was no real heat in her voice this time, only a profound, so deep exhaustion. "Your brother has nothing now." "Then maybe," I said evenly, the words carefully chosen, "he'll finally learn what it feels like to earn something for himself." I ended the call before she could respond, the click of the phone a final, emphatic period. Later that week, I drove by the house again. This time, Ryan was outside, wearing a plain work uniform, methodically loading the last of his belongings into a dented pickup truck that looked like it belonged to a construction company. When he saw me pull up, he froze. For a moment, I thought he might yell, might storm over and try to start another fight. But he didn't. He just stood there, jaw tight with unspoken resentment, and finally said, his voice flat, "Hope you're happy, man. You got what you wanted." I stepped out of the car, meeting his gaze directly, holding it. "No, Ryan," I said quietly, my voice laced with a deep, lingering sadness. "I didn't get what I wanted. I want a family that respected me. Instead, I got this. But at least now we're even." He didn't reply. He just climbed into the truck and drove away without another word, leaving a faint cloud of dust in his wake. Over the next few months, the dust settled, both literally and figuratively. The lien I had filed was formally lifted after the sale closed, and the bank's internal review of the unauthorized withdrawal finally wrapped up. To my genuine surprise, they credited a significant portion of the $120,000 back to my account, citing unauthorized withdrawal and breach of co-signer agreement. I used some of that money to meticulously renovate the house, not because I wanted to live in it. I had no intention of ever moving back, but because I wanted to transform it into something completely and undeniably mine. I repainted every wall, tore out the old, worn carpet, updated the kitchen with modern fixtures, and turned Ryan's old bedroom into a sleek, functional home office. When the renovations were finally done, I held a small housewarming party, just a few close friends. No family. We sat in the backyard with music playing softly, laughing, eating barbecue, the distant city lights glowing like scattered jewels in the twilight. At one point, one of my friends looked around, a genuine smile on her face, and said, "This place feels like it was built for you." I smiled a real, authentic smile. "It wasn't," I said, "but it is now." Word got around town, of course. I heard through various neighbors that my parents had moved into a small, nondescript rental unit across the city. They still hadn't spoken to me again after that last phone call. Maybe they were profoundly embarrassed. Maybe they were still seething with anger. Maybe both. And honestly, I didn't care anymore, because for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't living under their oppressive shadow. I wasn't waiting for their conditional approval or dodging their constant judgment. I was building something of my own, and it was stronger, more resilient, and more fulfilling than anything they had ever given me. Months later, I drove past her old rental house on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Ryan was outside, this time wearing a plain work uniform, diligently unloading tools from a truck that clearly belonged to a construction company. He looked up and saw me driving by. Our eyes met for a split second. He didn't glare this time. He didn't smirk. He just nodded once, a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, and then he quietly turned back to his work. I kept driving, a strange, profound calm washing over me. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but it was something close, a quiet acceptance of the new, irrevocable reality. Back at my house, my sanctuary, I walked into the kitchen, set my keys on the counter, and looked around the space that was now completely, utterly, undeniably mine. And for the first time in what felt like years, I let out a deep, genuine laugh. Not because I was happy they had lost everything, but because I had finally taken everything back. My money, my future, my life. I stood there for a moment, smiling to myself, and whispered the words I wanted to say for months, a silent vow to the universe. This time, I'm not leaving. And with that, I closed the door behind me, sealing my freedom.